As I have said before, I said today we are going to be covering the next topic, which is the scholastic theory. I'm going to be so quick because if we use this speed, trust me, we shall not be able to finish this in the time allocated. So the scholastic theory, as I said before, we talked of different theories. And under this theory, there were many scholars that came up with theories. And I remember I explained to you what is a scholar. We said scholars are those people who are studying other people's ideas to come out with assumptions or clear point basing on what other people have already presented. So when we look at these theories or the scholastic theory, there's a slight definition here that says the scholastic is driven from a Greek word, and it refers to a scholar. And I've already mentioned what is a scholar. With this theory, presents moral moral. Sorry on that. Did I miss anything? Okay, I already mentioned the scholars. With this theory, it presents moral philosophy coined for the various thoughts, preaching and discussion made on philosophical issues. As I said before, this theory will look at what other people had tried to contribute and what are their ideas on business ethics. Those people's ideas could be in form of thoughts, could be in form of preachings or discussions. As I said before, that in this topic we are going to look at more on Christianity, its preaching or its teaching, the biblical teaching, or basing on ethics. And we shall see how we relate it to our business ethics. Predominantly around the 12th century during the medieval historical theory. The medieval historical theory was a theory when books were being translated from the Greek to Arabia, and there were a lot of philosophies that came up with ideas. And during these periods, a lot of translation was taking place. And during this same period, this was when universities started rising up, philosophers started rising up with a lot of details and findings. And this one, as we said, we are going to look at the scholastic theory. Obviously, this period is going to be helping us a lot. That is the early 12th century. The scholasticism in medieval period, we have what we call the pedagogue approach. In the medieval period, universities translated text from Greek, Arabia into Latin. I've already mentioned that. Of course, we are trying to look at this period. Works of Aristotle. This was one of the gentlemen who contributed so much as a scholar in developing some of the theories or some of the ideas. And they say provided significant basics for this system of thoughts. And the year was that. We have seen the year. Development of the scholasticism. Aristotle's, I said this is a gentleman, translated works were crucial in development of a structured system of philosophical and theological inquiries. So all his work was through other people's ideas, and he was basing on what other people had already discovered. Could be in philosophical or theological theories. With theological theories, of course, philosophical, those are ideas of other people. Then when we talk of theological, we look at study of God. All those studies that other people had developed during that period. This intellectual movement could later be significantly influenced by figures like other people also came in to join Aristotle's in this study or in finding out these details. And one was Thomas Aquinas. Though his name is cut off in the image, the content implies him. This one is very clear, though he was not so clearly, but he was one of the philosophers who came up with a lot of business ethic theories. Let me continue. For figures, let's look at some of the major figures, as I had already started mentioning up there. The main figures that were contributing during that period of the rising of the translation of books. The contributors, I said the first one is Thomas Aquinas, and that was the year. A pivotal figure whose synthesis of Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology profoundly shaped Western thoughts. He was one of the students for this gentleman called Pivotal, this Thomas, and he used most of his these teachers' ideas, which were more connected to Christian theological pronounly ideas that his teacher had tried to come up with, and he also adopted some of those ideas in his scholar material. Then we have someone called Duns Scotus, known for his emphasis on divine will and individual existence. For him, his theory was so much into divinity or divine life or divine willing, and also existing as individuals. We look at also another scholar called William. His material came around that year. He was famous for what we call the Ockham's razor, or his contribution to nomadism. When we look at the word nomadism, it states that abstract objects or universal properties do not exist independently of individual things. According to him, this theory that Ockham that is known of Occam razor, to him, nothing exists without a human being close to it, or without a contribution of a human being. That is according to William. This philosopher made a substantial contribution to philosophical studies during the period. That was a summary on him. Let's look at some of the instruments that were used during that. Instruments and goal of the scholastic philosophies. The basic instruments, first was definition. Precision in defining terms and concepts. They first concentrated mostly on defining some of the terms of other scholars. I said these ones, most of them, they look at what other people discovered. Then distinctions, carefully differentiating between related but distinct ideas. They would look at what people developed and they relate those ideas and see what was the difference. As we know, theories and assumptions, how they develop all together. They also used arguments as one of the instruments, rigorously logical reasoning to support conclusions. They also used arguments, they compare theories, and they used the arguments to see which theory was a little bit contributing or backing the business ethics, or which theory was in line with the business ethic theories. The ideal goals, the persuasion of certain truth. They would look at the truth in the theory itself, acknowledge the conclusion often remained at the level of probable conclusion rather than absolute certainty. They could not give a final conclusion in their theories because these were people's thoughts. What they would do is only to compare and also contribute based on what other people were also, when you see in the argument here, rigorous reasoning to support conclusions. So they would look for ideas from other people and they would see how they put up that together. Influence on the scholastic philosophies, the primary influences was the church. As I said before, these people were influenced by other teachings, and the major influencer of their theories or their philosophies was the church, which, if we have seen, the primary theory being the church. The scholastic philosophies was fundamental, influenced by the church. Its proceeding, doctrine, the content of the Old and the New Testament heavily shaped the philosophical inquiries. This one is very clear for all of us. As I said, it is by the church. They look at the philosophical fundamental influence by the church, its proceedings, doctrines, the content of the Old and the New Testament heavily shaped the philosophical inquiry. That is also very clear. The method of arguments, how did they argue their theories or their findings? Arguments were basically used to assess how far the content of the Bible leads to the truth. Because being scholars, they would study what other people would say, and they would look at that and see how that Bible theory would help to find the truth about a certain idea, or about, if we talk of, for example, last time we talked of the Kantian theory, and we said he mostly based his argument on what we call the categorical imperative. And the categorical imperative was so much basing on saying we as human beings, we exist, or if we do something as a human being, we assume that thing is also right somewhere, accepted by another human being somewhere. So for that, they would compare such kind of thoughts relating to what the Bible is saying. This is for the argument. The second point saying this highlights the strong integration of faith and reason in the scholar thoughts. Core issues in the scholastic philosophy, what were they mostly basing on in their theories? The first one, issues regarding moral reasoning. That was the first one. What could make somebody believe that this thing or this activity is accepted as a moral activity or as a moral ethical behavior, in other words? So one of the issues they looked at, what determines that something can be accepted as an ethical behavior, which is issues regarding moral reasoning. Secondly, the existence of life. First, hold on. I think these points were explained somewhere. Okay, no. Okay, they are not. These are just shortlisted. Let me explain them how they are. Secondly, they also looked at the existence of life. How does life exist, and how do people share life together as human beings? Secondly, who gave life to people and who is controlling the life of people? This was also one of the idea they also looked at in their argument. Then the third one, they also look at the virtue and the nature of God. That is also another issue which they also looked at in their philosophical theories or in their philosophical search as scholars. They were looking at, when we talk of the virtue, we talk of the traits of moral excellency or good or admirable qualities in a person. So they will look at what are those behaviors of human beings compared to the nature of God. Fourth, they also looked at the relationship between humanity and God. How do God relate with man? That was also another issue they also looked at. They also looked at issues prescribed by holy books. For example, the Bible. This one I already explained it. The thoughts and the pronouncement of the Pope. Of course, the Pope by then, he was called Pope Innocent III during this period, and he also had his own ideas on how human beings should behave. So they also used those ideas to develop their thoughts or their theories. Let's look at the Western influence or the roots of the Western philosophicals or scholasticism. The foundation of the Western philosophy, much of the Western philosophy is based on the thoughts and the teaching of the this word Socrates, Plato or Aristotle. With Aristotle, we already know him. Plato was also a student of the first gentleman I mentioned. If you remember this gentleman, that is Thomas Aquila, was their teacher. So all of them generated their thoughts from that gentleman, if I'm not mistaken on that. So those were the generation here. These are the origin. These are human beings. So they generated their theory. These are the people who influenced the Western philosophies on that point. So most of them, these two are students of Thomas Aquila, and they based their theories on the teachings of Thomas Aquila. We also continue and say Aristotle influenced on, because being a teacher, his influence, Aristotle was Pilate's best students. Most of these people, some of them were students to others. So a student will also pick a theory of his teacher, then he uses to analyze that theory to develop his own theory. And scholastic philosophy, the thoughts or the teaching of Aristotle served as the core basic for discussion, who he copied from his teacher, and also based as the statement said there, they served as the core basics for the discussion. Aristotle's famous dialectic method derived from logic was also a significant matter of discussion within the scholastic philosophy. That was also another point there. So his study also was so much on the discussion of his teacher, and that's how he developed his arguments. Let's look at the merits. What were the advantages of these theories or these philosophies? The initiation of the dialogues or the discussion. A key merit of the scholastic philosophy was its initiation of the dialogues, interactions, and thought-provoking discussions. So because of this, people were able to come together. They were able to come together and do discussions. So that's how these theories were able to be developed. That was one of the advantages of this. This occurred within an institutional framework, primarily universities. Of course, these arguments were within universities. As I said, during this period, that's when universities were raised up, were built by some of these philosophies, and within the universities, students would argue, as we already mentioned, some of the students here, they would argue and also develop some ideas. It established a pedagogical approach for discussing philosophical issues derived from the historical period. Of course, these scholastic philosophies also helped them to be able to dig down to some historical theories, and these arguments were able to help them to also develop some of the philosophies. Formal discussion of religious issues, formalizing religious discourses. When we come there with the first point, say, the scholastic philosophies for the first time provide a formal platform for discussion regarding religious issues. This is also another advantage under that. Of course, when we talk of that point, at this point, when people were arguing, that is when people started understanding what religious issues say. I'm sorry for the noise that was in the background. I could not stop. Of course, I'm still in the office, and I could not stop the presentation, but I apologize for that though. So the discussion were able to help us, or were able to help the scholars be able to discuss on some of the major issues regarding theory, regarding ethical behaviors. It allowed for structured inquiries or argument on matters of faith and theology. Also, through the argument, people were able to dig out some of the biblical teachings about faith and theology. As I said, theology is the study of God. So people were able to understand more about God through those arguments. Limitation of the scholastic philosophy, absent of a unique ethical theory. Of course, the limitation, one of the limitations is the absence of a unique ethical theory. There was no way they would come with an ethical theory that has never existed. that is new. All of what they presented were ideas of people who had already existed. So the absence of the unique philosophical theory was one of the limitations of this scholars. The point under that say a notable limitation of scholars' philosophy is that it had not formulated an ethical theory of its own, as I already said. They don't have their own. They base on what their teachers said, what the Bible writers said, that's what they were looking at. As such, it cannot be treated as one of the independent ethical theory like utilitarianism or deontological. You remember utilitarianism, we talked about this theory in our first point. Then theological, we also talked about that. So they could not develop their own theories because they were basing on other people's teaching. Instead, it largely integrated or systematized existing philosophical or theological ideas, what I just said. Instead, they were looking at what other people were saying. So it limited the system itself because they never had their own ideas. The sixth stage of moral development. Number one, these stages are likely from a gentleman we call Colbert stages of moral development, given the common terminology. How were the moral behaviors developed? And they were adopted based on this guy's idea. Number one, he talked of obedience and punishment orientation. For him, he said, for people to be obedient, they must be punished. And that is what we call the pro-conventional stage. Then secondly, he also says self-interest orientation. People have to be taught on how to love themselves, on how to develop good behaviors among themselves. So that way, they can develop moral behavior. Then another point, he said interpersonal accord or conformity. Interpersonal accord, you recognize yourself or you be contented with your own self. This way, you'll be able to behave morally in a community. The sixth stage of, we are continuing, sorry for reading that. After interpersonal accord, he talked of the authority and social order orientation. There must be an authority around that is controlling the people. For him, for morality to exist in a community, there must be an authority that is in place and that is keeping a social order. For example, we have the police, if it is given in the state of South Sudan. Then we have what we call the social contract orientation, the post-conventional stage. There must be agreements amid these people on how they should behave socially, how people should socialize among themselves. Then lastly is what we call the universal ethic orientation. This one is related to the categorical imperative, whereby what I do here now, I believe I'm doing it because in the world it's something that is accepted. So there must be ethical behaviors that are universally in existence. So with this one, we have finished with the scholar theory, and I believe that was very clear to us. And we have looked at that really in depth. We looked at the theories, their backgrounds, who developed them, and what are some of their contents. For the interest of time, these ones now where we are left, then I'm going to the next slide. I was talking about this. For those of you who are following the slides, I was talking about forecasting. This lecture I offered was for another class. So let's look at some of the issues that are under these theories. Moral reasoning and decision making. Some of these are just now some of the moral activities that are expected of people. Even coming down here, ethical issues in business. These ones I will go so sharp. Most of you can even handle this on your own. These moral issues in the business, they are not. It also comes almost the same like moral reasoning and decision making. In this one, as I mentioned it before, when you talk of moral reasoning, we are trying to reason what is that behavior that can be accepted as a good behavior. That is what we call moral reasoning. So we need to know what activity can we accept, and we say this activity is good. Let's look at its definition as I've read it put something on it. I say this is a process in which ethical issues or problems are benchmarked against a moral standard so that a moral judgment is possible. You look at a behavior, then you benchmark it to a certain behavior that was accepted sometimes back. Then you can judge and say, now this behavior, we can accept it in the community. As we looked at the scholars, we said the scholars kept on comparing. There was argument in decision making. So they could compare this behavior. Can we accept it or not? This behavior is mentioned by the Bible. Can we accept it in the community? So that was the moral reasoning. Which behavior do we accept? So for you to accept that behavior, it must be compared to some behaviors that had already been conducted. You benchmark it with some other moral standards which have been already, then from there now you can judge and accept it as a moral behavior to be adopted. It is based upon social norms, you see. For you to adopt or to compare during the moral reasoning, you look at social norms. What do other people believe to be the right thing? Values, system of nations. Hence, they may differ from place to place. However, reasoning made out of uniform principles of ethic prevails irrespective of location. So we look at what do we accept in South Sudan as good behavior? In China, what is it accepted? So can we accept it? This is the process of moral reasoning. So we look at norms. What do people believe? What do people accept as a behavior? And what do people say, okay, can we accept this in us? So we look at that and we say now we adopt. That is what we call the moral reasoning. Moral reasoning, we continue. For example, deciding to report a co-worker misconduct, weighing loyalty against honesty. So from here, this is another point, example, which is a little bit far from the example I was giving. When you're doing moral reasoning, you need to see the behavior of what this person has done. You weigh, yeah, before you accuse or you report someone, there is a reasoning gap. You're weighing between the loyalty against the honesty. What was the reason for this misconduct? If this guy, I report him, will he be honest to tell the truth? You weigh that process of reasoning. That is what we call the moral reasoning, to decide, should I report or I should not report? This was the reasoning that they're talking about. So you weigh, you do some weighing. With decision making in ethics, we have already talked of moral reasoning. Now I'm talking of decision making. In ethics, ethical decision making is choosing the course of action based on the moral reasoning and considering the impact on the stakeholder. Now, after you have reasoned and you say, okay, this is what is good to be done, then you decide. You decide it. We do it. This is what we call the decision making. So when you're deciding, let's accept this activity or let's accept this behavior for us to adopt as a business or as a company, you need to also look at its impact on your stakeholders. When we talk of stakeholders, we talk of the shareholders, we talk of the community, we talk of the customers. So you need to look at when we accept this after the moral reasoning, we accept this, for example, this behavior. Let me just go quickly. For example, let's punish those who involve in corruption. What impact does it have in the community, or what impact does it have with the stakeholders? Is it a good impact? If it's a good impact, yes, then we adopt that behavior of punishing or banning some kind of a dressing. We say from today, this dressing, we are not accepting it. So we need to look at that. It requires balancing facts, values, and possible consequence. So when we are deciding on an ethic behavior, we need to look at the facts, the values, and the possible consequence. You look at the truth about the behavior, then what does it weigh, or what good is it with that behavior? Then if we decide to do it, what impact does it bring to us? That is with decision making. Quickly, students, allow me go through this topic. I want to go through this topic as quick as possible. Kindly let me go through some of the issues in businesses, ethical issues. One, Some of these issues we know. Kindly help me to go quick on them. Discrimination, bribery, and corruption. These are active things that we know. Discrimination, the process of differentiating people in the organization. These are some of the ethical issues now. These are the examples now. We are coming practically now. Discriminating people in the organization, work environment through certain predetermined prejudice, usually not allowed by the law. You discriminate people by tribe, you discriminate people by color, you discriminate because someone is not from your tribe, you don't give a job. Someone is not from your tribe, you don't do this, you don't serve. You don't want to work with a person. This is very wrong. This is unethical. This is not ethical, but it is unethical. It is immoral, or it is irregular activities. I want to use the terminologies we have been using before. So discrimination is one of it. And types of discriminations, how do you know the types? Let me not go in depth in that. Financial discrimination, someone is paid higher because he's a relative to the boss. Employment discrimination, someone can be employed because he's a tribe mate to the HRR. Placement, you take someone from Juba and you take someone to work in WOW because he's your tribe mate. Promotion, you promote based on tribe or color or whatsoever it is. Transfer, you transfer based on tribe. I'm using tribe because it's the most common thing around within South Sudan. Termination, because people are talking, let's do discriminate. So you pardon me to use that example. It's the best example I can use. Termination, you terminate someone's contract because you don't like the person because of his color, because of the religion, maybe because of his tribe. Procurement, discrimination, you don't procure from a certain person, or you don't procure from a certain company because and you give the contract to a certain company because that person is your relative. That is all discrimination. So these are some of the types of discrimination. Bribery is the practice of offering something, e.g. money, in order to gain an illicit advantage. That is bribing. It's everywhere. You need something, give me something small. Bribery. It's a criminal offense, morally wrong, expose staff of organization to risks or prosecution, unlimited fines, possible imprisonment, which could endanger the firm's reputation because the firms will lose its reputation. Types of bribery, we had looked at the types of discrimination. Let's look at some of the types of bribery. We have the passive and the active. Passive, an offense committed by an official who receives the bribe. That is passive. The person who you give, that person who receives, he commits bribery passively. Then actively is you who is giving. That is the difference between the two. Corruption, the abuse of entrusted power for personnel or organization gain, often involving bribery, fraud, embezzlement, or favoritism. In business management, it determines fair competition. It undermines fair competition, erodes trust, increases cost, and damages companies' reputation. What's that? So corruption is whereby you use your power wrongly. And you use your power, then you bribe people, use your power to commit fraud. You can use your power to embezzle government things, and you take them for yourself. That is what we call corruption. Corruption on an ethical standpoint, corruption violates principle of integrity, fairness, transparency, accountability. It distorts decision-making, prioritizes personnel benefits over organizational societal goods, or often harms stakeholders, especially in environments where resources or opportunities are limited. In places where opportunities are limited, few people will benefit, then the rest will go without benefiting. And if it is in a company setting, meaning the resources of the company will be misused, and it causes a lot of issues. It compromises integrity, fairness, transparency. At the end of the day, the company can get even wrong reputation. As ethically responsible businesses adopt anti-corruption policies, train employees on compliance, enforce strict consequences to uphold corrupt standard and legal requirement. So that is with corruption. Sexual harassment, which is also another one. With sexual harassment, this is also common. I thank God in South Sudan, sexual harassment is not common at workplace because people have respect for women. But in some countries, sexual harassment is there. It is okay in South Sudan, still there. People can even offer a job. Give me sex, I give you a job. Such things happening. Okay, let's look at sexual harassment. Managing sexual harassment issues, establish a clear policy standard. This policy should provide a clear instrument on what constitutes a tolerable act and what is unforgivable. Develop a complaint collection mechanism, create a system for collecting complaints from victims, ensuring their protection and non-exposure of their names. So for companies to handle the issues concerning sex, this one mostly is affecting women. Sexual harassment is mostly on women. The manager say, bring that file to my office. Then he begins, there's a word, harassing you, in other words, sexual, mostly affecting women or ladies. So for an organization to manage such kind of things, these are some of the ways that have been put, clear policy, and also there must be a way, a system that is developed whereby anybody who feels he's harassed sexually can report. Sexual harassment could not be through touches, could be even through texts, could be through messages. Some managers send weird messages to staffs. So if you feel you are not comfortable with what he's doing, he's harassing you sexually, you as the staff, you have the right to accuse such a manager. So a system must be put. Sexual harassment, we are continuing. Other mechanism, establish a potential investment cell. There must be a group of people who can investigate some of the claims. Establish a specific prevention procedures. Also, a company or an organization must come up with how to prevent such kind of behaviors by implementing procedures to prevent such practices as early as possible. Training your staff against sexual dangers of sexual harassment, putting rules and regulations so that everyone can see them. Such can prevent sexual harassment in advance. So that someone will know, if I do this, this will happen to me. That one is sexual. After sexual harassment, then the second ethical behavior in business or unethical behavior is what we call fair remuneration. Fair remuneration refers to paying employees wages or benefits that are just. Pay people worth what is equal to what they need. You give them what is equal of what they require. That one is sexual. We begin from office romance and whistle blowing. So with the fair remuneration, I was saying fair remuneration is in a way that you pay people based on their skills, their education level, their responsibilities, fairly. Let everyone get what he's worth of, what it is his. It's an ethical way of how business should also run. An ethical issue, as an ethical issue, it involves ensuring that the compensation is free from exploitation, ensuring that the compensation is free from exploitation, compliance with labor law, and reflects fairness compared to industrial standard. The payment of people should not be exploited in other way. You don't need to pay people because maybe someone is like this. No, pay somebody fairly, and it should be according to the law. What does the law say? According to payment, leave, which leave days have to be paid, which leave days have not to be paid, how much an engineer must get. It's unfortunate that in our country, we don't have some of these laws. But in some countries, they have standards of how people must be paid, how much teachers must be paid. Uganda has already adopted that, how much teachers must be paid, and it's a standard price, though it is mostly in the public institutions. With private, still most of them decide. A big school pays well, all that. So, but basically, they must follow the law, and it should reflect fairness according to the industrial standard. Let me see romance. Let me see what is left. I think with the next lecture, I'll be able to finish the remaining, because most of these points are just as soft as these ones. There is no the one which is.
Sir,
Yes, please.
I need clarification. Let me take you back.
Please.
I won't take you back in bribery.
Bribery.
Yeah, let me just need clarification. I know bribery is anti-moral behaviors.
Yes, sir.
But sometimes I need to differentiate for me legal financial motivation and bribery, because sometimes if you want to operate company,
yes,
and you come to different communities, and sometimes they may not allow you to operate in their land. And for that, maybe you give some money and then they offer you a land, such that you have to operate your company. So I want you to differentiate. Is that the financial motivation is also bribery, or different from bribery?
Yes. For now, let me answer you, but I'll answer you best when I read what we call the social, the corporate social responsibilities. Hope you're seeing where the cursor is. Topic number 4. You influence because you need something in order to. Okay, there are some companies that go to a community and they bribe the community for the sake so that they get something. That becomes a bribery. Now, the difference is when a company is doing out of goodwill, not to influence a decision, you're doing because you just want to give back. You see, that is a different. Now, there is whereby a company goes to, it's common in South Sudan, a company goes to a community and need to set up. The company has to give specific amount of money. That one cannot be a bribery because it's already a system or it is in the law. Now it becomes a bribery when the company, maybe they refused it, they refused it to start, or the community say, we are not taking your money, though it is according to the law, we are not taking your money, we don't want you to operate. Then the bosses will say, have something small. Now that something small is the bribe, because you're already influencing somebody's decision. The moment you're influencing someone to change his decision, that becomes a bribe. Now there's whereby you give something out of goodwill. That one, there is a difference. You can give something out of goodwill. That's why we say procurement officers. For procurement officers, you're not supposed to accept gifts when you don't know why it is being given. And when you're accepting a gift, it should be something clear, open, everyone should see. But when someone is hiding it, he wants you alone or you with your friends to eat, then that is a bribe because it's already influencing a decision. So you differentiate between the social corporate responsibility and between the need, maybe you open the tax or the government law, because the government law says before a company opens the South Sudan law, before you open, the community must have its own share. So that one is one of the point also you should look at. So I think you've got the.
Thank you.
Yes, it is influencing somebody's decision. That is a bribe. I think, members, thank you so much for that question, sir. Thank you. It's a good one. I think at this point, yes, I've reached the end. Someone was asking about the next time. Allow me start from. I said I will start from where? I will start from romance and whistleblowing.